guys, tonight we're stepping away from the thunderous clashes of gods and the monumental labors of heroes. Instead, we're going to whisper about a very special, very quiet, and incredibly clever birth. Imagine, if you will, the cool, damp silence of a secluded mountain cave, far from the bustling world, where the very air seems to hold secrets. We're delving into divine infancy, a very unique childhood, exploring the concept of a god's extraordinary, often preternatural infancy in Greek mythology, a period where divine powers manifested almost immediately upon birth, setting the stage for future greatness, but in a very, very quiet, often mischievous way. You probably won't survive this journey awake, but that's entirely the point, isn't it? So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now, down in the comments. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're in ancient Greece, a world where the gods aren't just powerful beings. They are beings whose very existence defies mortal norms, especially from the moment they come into being. Unlike human babies who are utterly helpless and dependent for years, divine infants often possess an astonishing level of awareness, intelligence, and even active power from the moment they are born. This concept of a precocious god, or a wonder child, is a recurring theme in mythology, highlighting their inherent divinity. Imagine a newborn, but one who is not crying for milk or gazing blankly at the world. Instead, this divine infant might be observing, planning, even speaking within hours of birth. Their minds are already fully formed, brimming with celestial wisdom and an understanding of the cosmic order. Their tiny bodies, though seemingly fragile, already contain immense, nascent power waiting to be expressed. This unique childhood sets them apart from both mortals and even other older gods. While older gods like Zeus had to grow and mature, sometimes in secret, other divine infants displayed immediate capabilities. This precocity serves several narrative purposes, demonstrates inherent divinity. It immediately establishes their godhood, proving they are not merely exceptional mortals, but beings of a different order. Foreshadows future role. Their early abilities often hint at their future domains and characteristics. A newborn god of wisdom might speak profound truths. A god of war might display aggressive tendencies. Allows for early intervention. Their immediate awareness allows them to engage in pivotal actions or make crucial decisions, sometimes even before the world is fully aware of their existence. This can jumpstart their mythical journey, highlights their uniqueness. It emphasizes that even among gods, some are truly exceptional from their very inception, born with a special spark. The stories of these divine infancies are often filled with a gentle, understated humor, a quiet mischief, as these powerful beings, trapped in tiny bodies, begin to subtly manipulate the world around them. they might outwit older, more established gods, or cleverly acquire their signature attributes, all while appearing to be helpless newborns. This contrast between their apparent innocence and their profound abilities is a key part of their charm. One quirky tidbit about divine infants: they were often nourished by special divine food like ambrosia and nectar, as we've seen with Zeus, which rapidly accelerated their growth and solidified their divine nature. This further distinguishes them from mortal infants and explains their quick development. Historians still argue whether the concept of precocious divine infants reflected early beliefs in reincarnation, or if it was simply a narrative device to introduce complex characters fully formed into the mythological landscape. Either way, it made for a fascinating, if sometimes unsettling, start to a god's life. So, as you prepare to drift off, consider the extraordinary nature of a god's childhood, where intelligence and power emerge not over years, but in mere moments. This unique infancy sets the stage for the quiet, mischievous beginnings of our story tonight, focusing on a particular young god whose cleverness began even before his first proper nap. The stillness of a secret birthplace is now settling around you. You've just been introduced to the fascinating concept of divine infancy, where gods arrive in the world with astonishing precocity. Our story tonight focuses on one such extraordinary infant, and his earliest adventures began in the most unassuming of places. This brings us to Maya's cave, a secret birthplace, detailing Hermes' mother and his secluded, quiet birthplace, a humble yet sacred refuge where a powerful god could be born and begin his mischievous life, hidden from the watchful and often jealous eyes of the Olympian pantheon. Imagine the cool, damp earth, the hush of ancient rock, sheltering a burgeoning divine intellect. You see Zeus, the king of the gods, despite his supreme authority, often engaged in his numerous romantic liaisons in secret, particularly when the object of his affection was a nymph or a lesser goddess, trying to avoid the wrath of his perpetually jealous wife, Hera. In this instance, Zeus found himself drawn to Maya, one of the 7 Pleiades daughters of Atlas. Maya was known for her shy and reclusive nature, preferring the solitude of her cave. Imagine Maya's cave. It was located high up on Mount Kylene Selene in Arcadia, a wild and rugged region of Greece. This wasn't a grand palace or a bustling city. Instead, it was a deep, secluded grotto, hidden from prying eyes, nestled among ancient trees and rocky outcrops. The air would be cool and damp, perhaps carrying the scent of moss and earth. The sounds would be limited to the gentle drip of water, the rustle of leaves outside, or the soft breathing of the animals that might also seek shelter there. It was in this quiet, unassuming, and deeply secret birthplace that Maya gave birth to her son, by Zeus Hermes. The seclusion was paramount. Hera's jealousy, as we've seen in the story of Leto and Apollo, was legendary and lethal. Any child of Zeus born to another goddess or mortal faced immediate persecution. Maia, being a modest nymph, understood this danger perfectly. Her cave, therefore, served as a perfect sanctuary. It allowed Hermes to be born and spend his earliest, most precocious hours away from the prying eyes of Olympus, particularly Hera. This secrecy gave him the freedom to develop his astonishing abilities without immediate divine interference or punitive action. He was able to be born, stretch his tiny limbs, and immediately begin his career as a trickster god, all while his existence was largely unknown to the jealous queen of the gods. The atmosphere of the cave itself would have been conducive to quiet contemplation and subtle mischief. It was a space removed from the grand dramas of Olympus, a place where nascent power could quietly simmer and ingenious plans could be hatched without interruption. It symbolized Hermes' own nature, often operating in the shadows, moving unseen and surprising those who underestimated him. One quirky tidbit about Maia: she was the eldest and most reclusive of the Pleiades. Her shy nature made her the perfect choice for a secret liaison with Zeus, as she valued solitude and discretion, qualities that directly enabled Hermes' covert infancy. Historians still argue whether the consistent depiction of gods born in caves or secluded places reflects ancient Greek beliefs about the sacredness of such natural sites, or if it was a narrative device to explain how certain powerful figures managed to escape early detection by rival deities. Either way, Hermes' birthplace was strategically chosen. So, as you drift towards sleep, picture the quiet solitude of Maia's cave high on Mount Kylene. The cool, damp air settles around you, the gentle drip of water echoes faintly, and in that profound hush, a divine infant brimming with precocious intelligence begins his extraordinary and delightfully mischievous life, hidden from the world. The secrets of the cave are now gently whispering you to sleep. You've just settled into the tranquil quiet of Maia's secluded cave, the secret birthplace of a uniquely precocious god. Now, to truly understand the nature of this extraordinary infant and the cosmic drama he inadvertently sparked, we must look to his lineage. This brings us to Zeus's paternity, the king's offspring, explaining his divine father and the profound implications of this powerful lineage for Hermes' inherent nature, his domains, and the inevitable conflicts that would arise from his very existence. Imagine being the son of the supreme ruler of the cosmos, a direct inheritance of immense, if sometimes troublesome, power. You see, Hermes was not just any god. He was the son of Zeus, the mighty king of the gods, the wielder of the thunderbolt, the supreme ruler of Olympus and all the cosmos. This parentage immediately granted Hermes immense inherent power, divine status, and a connection to the very pinnacle of the Olympian pantheon. He inherited a spark of Zeus's cleverness, his cunning, and his ability to navigate complex situations. However, being a son of Zeus also came with its own set of complications, particularly because his mother, Maia, was a nymph, and not Zeus's legitimate wife, Hera. This fact immediately placed Hermes in a precarious position destined to be an object of Hera's perpetual jealousy and occasional persecution, much like Apollo and Hercules before him. His birth, though secret, was a quiet affront to the queen of the gods. Zeus, though often absentee or distracted in his parenting, always recognized his divine offspring. His paternity bestowed upon Hermes certain inherent qualities and destined him for particular roles: intelligence and cunning. Zeus himself, as we saw in the overthrow of Cronus, was a god of immense cunning and strategic thinking. Hermes inherited this trait in abundance, displaying astonishing cleverness from the moment of his birth. His trickster nature, his ability to outwit others, and his sharp intellect are direct reflections of his father's strategic mind. Speed and agility. Zeus commands the winds and moves swiftly across the heavens. Hermes, as we know, would become the swiftest of the gods. The divine messenger traversing vast distances with incredible speed and agility. This swiftness is a natural extension of his father's pervasive influence across the cosmos. Authority, eventual being the son of the king of the gods, meant that despite his initial humble beginnings and mischievous tendencies, Hermes possessed an inherent authority that would eventually lead him to a prominent role on Olympus. He might be playful, but he commanded respect when necessary, backed by the ultimate power of his father. The trickster archetype. While Zeus was a master of grand deceptions, like disguising himself to woo mortals, Hermes became the epitome of the clever, sometimes morally ambiguous trickster. This aspect, though perhaps refined and given a unique flavor by Hermes, certainly has its roots in Zeus's own history of bending rules and outwitting foes. Zeus's knowledge of Hermes's birth, even if initially secret from Hera, meant that the infant god had a powerful, albeit distant, protector. This ensured that, despite Hera's potential wrath or any other dangers, Hermes's divine path was ultimately secured by the king of the gods himself. Zeus would eventually find amusement in his son's cleverness, even when it involved slighting other gods. One quirky tidbit about Zeus's divine paternity: his countless children, born to various goddesses and mortals, often ended up with very distinct domains and personalities, reflecting the multifaceted aspects of Zeus himself. Hermes, with his boundless energy and trickster nature, is a perfect encapsulation of a certain mischievous intellectual side of Zeus. Historians still argue whether Zeus's numerous affairs served a mythological purpose of explaining the origins of various natural phenomena or cultural practices, or if they simply reflected societal norms of powerful male figures. Either way, his prolific paternity was a constant source of divine drama. So, as you drift towards sleep, picture the king of the gods, Zeus, unknowingly fathering a tiny, incredibly clever infant in a secluded cave. This divine paternity imbued Hermes with a unique blend of power and cunning, shaping his destiny as the ultimate trickster god, and inevitably leading to a very quiet, yet cosmically significant act of defiance against his older brother, Apollo. The thunder of Zeus's presence is now a distant, soothing rumble. You've just realized the profound implications of Zeus's paternity for the infant Hermes, imbuing him with inherent power and cunning. But, as with every child born from Zeus's extramarital dalliances, a predictable, ever-present cloud loomed over their divine infancy, the boundless fury of the queen of the gods. This brings us to Hera's jealousy, an ever-present shadow, briefly acknowledging the pervasive and relentless disdain of Zeus's legitimate wife for his illegitimate offspring, a divine antagonism that, though sometimes distant, shaped the very atmosphere of Hermes' secret birth and his cautious, early maneuvers. Imagine a powerful goddess constantly simmering with resentment, her gaze sweeping the cosmos for any sign of her husband's latest indiscretion. You see, Hera, the queen of the gods, was the legitimate wife of Zeus, the goddess of marriage and childbirth, and a formidable power in her own right. Her position meant she fiercely guarded the sanctity of her marriage, or at least her husband's fidelity. And Zeus, with his endless appetite for mortal and divine lovers, constantly provided her with reasons for furious indignation. When Zeus fathered children with goddesses or nymphs other than Hera, her reaction was almost always the same: a furious, relentless, and often cruel persecution of the mother and her divine offspring. We've seen this with Leto, Apollo's mother, whom Hera chased across the world, preventing her from finding a place to give birth. This pattern of divine harassment was a common and very boringly predictable trope in Greek mythology. For Hermes, born in the secluded cave of Maia on Mount Kyllene, Hera's jealousy was an ever-present, though perhaps not immediately active threat. Maia understood this danger perfectly. The very act of hiding Hermes' birth was a direct response to the knowledge of Hera's potential wrath. Had Hera discovered the infant Hermes immediately, she might have attempted to destroy him, much as she sent snakes after the infant Hercules, or tried to prevent Apollo's birth entirely. This constant simmering resentment from Hera created a background hum of tension throughout Zeus's numerous divine families. It meant that children like Hermes, while powerful, often had to be precocious and cunning from birth, learning to navigate the treacherous landscape of Olympian politics, often operating with discretion and guile to avoid drawing the queen's attention. Hera's jealousy wasn't just about personal slight. It was also about maintaining cosmic order, or her version of it. For her, Zeus's illegitimate children represented a disruption to the established hierarchy and a challenge to her authority as queen. Her persecutions, however cruel, were often driven by a sense of righteous indignation from her perspective. One quirky tidbit about Hera's jealousy, while her wrath was terrifying, it sometimes inadvertently pushed Zeus's children to greater acts of heroism or cunning as they had to overcome her obstacles. In a strange way, her antagonism was a catalyst for their divine development. Historians still argue whether Hera's jealousy was simply a narrative device to explain the suffering of heroes and gods, or if it reflected actual societal anxieties about adultery, legitimacy, and the power of matriarchs in ancient Greece. Either way, her presence in the background of any Zeus-born child's story was a given. So, as you drift towards sleep, consider the ever-present watchful shadow of Hera's jealousy, a constant underlying tension in the vast cosmos. For the infant Hermes, nestled secretly in Maya's cave, this divine animosity was a distant hum, a quiet warning that would shape his mischievous nature and his ingenious early exploits. The quiet tension of a hidden birth is now settling around you, gently easing you into oblivion. You've just acknowledged the ever-present simmering shadow of Hera's jealousy, a constant backdrop to the secret birth of the infant Hermes. But despite the need for discretion, this was no ordinary newborn. From the moment he emerged from Maya's cave, Hermes displayed an astonishing, almost unbelievable degree of awareness and capability. This brings us to Hermes's precocity, a clever newborn, detailing his immediate astonishing intelligence and his incredibly early abilities, setting him apart as a uniquely gifted and mischievously brilliant god from his very first breath. Imagine a baby just hours old, already plotting and inventing. You see, while many divine infants possess some level of extraordinary power, Hermes was in a league of his own when it came to mental acuity and physical prowess, practically from the moment of his birth. According to the Homeric hymn to Hermes, which recounts his birth and early deeds, he displayed astonishing capabilities almost instantly. Immediate awareness. He wasn't crying for milk like a mortal infant. Instead, his mind was already fully formed and exceptionally sharp. Imagine a newborn opening its eyes and immediately observing its surroundings, processing information, and beginning to plan. Rapid mobility. Within moments or hours of his birth, Hermes was not only able to crawl, but also to walk. He quickly snuck out of his swaddling clothes and out of Maya's cave, eager to explore the world and engage in mischief. Imagine a tiny baby deftly untangling himself from his blankets and slipping away into the night. A truly remarkable feat of agility. Sophisticated thought. His thoughts were not those of an infant. He was capable of complex reasoning, strategic planning, and understanding cause and effect. He immediately sought to establish his status among the gods, to acquire wealth or influence, demonstrating a clear ambition from the very beginning. Ingenious invention. Perhaps the most astonishing display of his precocity was his immediate inventive genius. Within his first day of life, he would famously invent the lyre, a complex musical instrument from a tortoise shell. Imagine a newborn with the dexterity and intellectual capacity to conceptualize and construct such a device. This immediate precocity is a defining characteristic of Hermes. It foreshadows his future roles as the god of trickery, cunning travelers, commerce, and invention. He doesn't grow into his powers. He's born with them, fully developed, or at least rapidly emerging within hours. His divine essence manifests as immediate brilliance and a mischievous spirit. His earliest actions, undertaken literally on the day of his birth, demonstrate this blend of astonishing ability and playful cunning. He is curious, resourceful, and unafraid to challenge established norms or powerful figures, even if those figures are his elder Olympian siblings. He is a god who learns and adapts at an incredible speed, capable of outwitting those far older and seemingly more experienced than himself. One quirky tidbit about his infancy, the Homeric hymn, describes him as an ambitious newborn, suggesting that even from birth, he was driven by a desire for status and recognition among the gods, a common trait in the Olympian pantheon. Historians still argue whether the extreme precocity of Hermes in myths was a way to emphasize his unique trickster nature, or if it reflects an ancient fascination with genius and innate talent. Either way, it makes for a very compelling and often amusing divine infancy. So, as you drift toward sleep picture, the impossibly clever newborn Hermes, barely out of his swaddling clothes, already fully aware, agile, and brimming with ingenious ideas. This tiny, mischievous god, born in a secret cave, is about to embark on his very first, surprisingly quiet act of cunning, setting the stage for his playful yet profoundly significant career among the gods. The stillness of the cave is now quietly lulling you. You've just marveled at Hermes's astonishing precocity, a newborn god already fully aware and impossibly clever. And, true to his inventive nature, his very first act after slipping from his cradle wasn't mischief, but a remarkable feat of craftsmanship. This brings us to the turtle and the lyre. Ingenious invention detailing how the infant Hermes discovered a humble tortoise and with astonishing speed and ingenuity transformed it into a complex, beautiful musical instrument showcasing his natural talent for creation and his harmonious spirit, even before his more famous trickery. Imagine a baby god, less than a day old, building a musical instrument from found objects. You see, having stealthily slipped out of Maya's cave, Hermes, still a tiny infant, began to explore his surroundings on Mount Kylene. His sharp mind, already brimming with ideas, was immediately drawn to a peculiar sight, a tortoise or turtle. The terms were often interchangeable in ancient Greek, but typically referred to a land tortoise. Imagine this small, unassuming creature scuttling slowly across the ground, minding its own business. Most beings would simply observe or ignore it. But Hermes, with his innate genius for invention, saw not just an animal, but a potential instrument. He recognized the tortoise's hollow shell, its natural resonance, and immediately conceived of its transformation. This was not a pre-existing idea he simply copied. It was a spontaneous act of creative brilliance. With astonishing speed and dexterity, the newborn Hermes proceeded to construct the very first lyre. Imagine the tiny yet incredibly nimble hands of the infant god working with precision and foresight. He skillfully killed the tortoise, extracting its flesh. Some accounts suggest he respectfully prepared its meat. He then meticulously cleaned out its shell, leaving it hollow and resonant. He fashioned 7 strings from the intestines of an ox, perhaps from a previous sacrifice or perhaps already planning his future theft. 7 strings, a number often associated with harmony and the muses. He stretched these strings across the shell, using ox hide and 2 reeds for the arms and a crossbar for tension. The result was a beautiful, resonant, musical instrument. Imagine the soft, clear tones that emanated from this simple shell, plucked by the tiny fingers of the infant god. The sound was enchanting, full of harmony and melody, a testament to Hermes's inherent connection to music and the arts. He immediately began to play it, charming himself and the silent cave with its sweet sounds. This act of inventing the lyre so quickly, almost spontaneously, highlights several aspects of Hermes's character. Ingenuity, his ability to see potential in the mundane and transform it into something new and beautiful. Craftsmanship, his inherent skill in working with materials, demonstrating his future role as a god of artisans and crafts. Harmony, the invention of a musical instrument, speaks to his connection with order, beauty, and the soothing power of music, even amidst his mischievous nature. Precocious talent. It was an immediate display of genius, cementing his status as a god, unlike any other capable of creation from the moment he drew breath. One quirky tidbit: the lyre, once invented by Hermes, became his signature attribute and a symbol of music throughout Greek mythology. He would later give it to Apollo in a pivotal exchange, establishing a lasting connection between the 2 gods, despite their initial conflict. Historians still argue whether the invention of the lyre by Hermes was a way to explain the origin of music as a divine gift, or if it reflected an ancient understanding that even tricksters could be creators of beauty and harmony. Either way, it was a truly boringly miraculous act of invention. So, as you drift towards sleep, picture the impossibly clever infant Hermes finding a simple tortoise in the quiet of his cave, and with astonishing speed transforming it into the world's very first lyre. The soft, gentle melodies of his new invention are now quietly drifting through the air, lulling you into a peaceful, harmonious oblivion. This subtle act of creation sets the stage for his next, more audacious and surprisingly quiet exploit. You've just witnessed Hermes's astonishingly quick invention of the lyre from a tortoise shell, a testament to his innate ingenuity. Now, with a new instrument in hand and a restless, precocious energy bubbling within him, the infant god's gaze turns to a tempting target, a source of potential status, and more importantly, a chance for his first truly audacious act of trickery. This brings us to Apollo's sacred cattle. A tempting target, introducing the prized herd of his elder brother, peacefully grazing, utterly unaware that their serene existence is about to be quietly, meticulously disrupted by a mischievous newborn. Imagine a vast, contented herd, utterly oblivious to the tiny, calculating mind setting its sights on them. You see, Apollo, the radiant god of light music, prophecy, and archery, possessed a magnificent herd of 50 sacred cattle. These were no ordinary livestock. They were divine beasts, gleaming white, plump, and tended with the utmost care, grazing peacefully in the lush plains of Pieria, a region bordering Thessaly. Apollo, being a god of order, was very proud of his well-kept herd, seeing them as a symbol of his pastoral domain and his divine prosperity. He would often spend his days tending them, perhaps playing his lyre, the instrument he would one day acquire from Hermes, to them, or simply basking in their tranquil presence. Imagine these cattle peaceful, well-fed, their coats shining in the sun, utterly unsuspecting of any danger. They represented a symbol of established divine order, a picture of serene, boring pastoral life. They were, in essence, a visible manifestation of Apollo's serene domain. For the newborn, Hermes, still in his cradle, figuratively speaking, but with a fully developed intellect and an ambitious spirit, this herd represented a perfect opportunity. Why steal cattle? A challenge. For a precocious trickster like Hermes, the idea of successfully stealing something so valuable from an elder, powerful god like Apollo, without being caught, was an irresistible challenge. It was a test of his nascent cunning, a means to an end. Cattle, in ancient Greece, were a symbol of wealth, status, and sacrifice. Acquiring such a herd, even illicitly, could immediately elevate Hermes' standing among the gods, demonstrating his prowess and resourcefulness. He was seeking a quicker path to recognition than simply waiting to grow up. A prophetic hint. His future domain would include commerce, thievery, and travelers, all of which involve movement and acquisition of goods. This first theft, therefore, was a prophetic act foreshadowing his eventual roles. Pure mischief. And let's not forget the simple joy of mischief for its own sake. Hermes was a trickster, and the idea of outwitting a powerful elder brother simply because he could was a delightful prospect. The cattle were not just valuable. Their sacred nature meant that their theft would be a profound affront, a challenge to Apollo's authority. This made them an even more tempting target for a newborn god looking to make a memorable entrance onto the Olympian stage. Apollo, with his focus on harmony and reason, was utterly unprepared for the cunning of a divine infant who could barely walk. One quirky tidbit about the sacred cattle Their gleaming white coats were often considered a sign of their divine nature and purity, making their theft even more sacrilegious and audacious. Historians still argue whether the theft of Apollo's cattle was merely a humorous origin story for Hermes' trickster nature, or if it reflects deeper societal conflicts between established agricultural wealth and the rising importance of commerce and cunning. Either way, it was a very significant herd. So, as you drift towards sleep, picture the peaceful, unsuspecting herd of Apollo's sacred cattle grazing calmly in the plains of Pieria. Little do they know that a tiny, incredibly clever, newborn god, still smelling of mother's milk, has set his mischievous gaze upon them, plotting his very first, surprisingly quiet and remarkably audacious act of theft. The gentle sound of grazing is slowly lulling you now. You've just glimpsed Apollo's serene, unsuspecting cattle peacefully grazing, blissfully unaware of the mischievous plot unfolding in the mind of a newborn god. With his target firmly identified and his prodigious cunning already active, Hermes wasted no time. This brings us to the theft begins, stealth and cunning, detailing his meticulous and ingenious plan to steal the cattle, not by force or confrontation, but by sheer, undetectable trickery, establishing his legendary reputation as the master of stealth and deception. Imagine a tiny baby moving through the night with the silence and precision of a seasoned thief. You see, Hermes was not about to simply walk up to Apollo's herd and drive them away. That would be too obvious, too noisy, and would leave a clear trail. His genius lay in his ability to be utterly undetectable, to make the impossible seem as if it never happened. His plan was a marvel of strategic thinking for a literal infant. Under the cover of night, Hermes chose the darkest hours of the night for his grand exploit. Darkness provides cover, reduces visibility, and adds to the mystery of disappearance. He slipped out of Maya's cave quietly, leaving his swaddling clothes behind to maintain the illusion of an innocent sleeping baby. Imagine the vast, quiet expanse of the moonlit landscape, perfect for a tiny, mischievous god to operate unseen, driving the cattle backwards. This was perhaps the most ingenious part of his plan. Instead of driving the cattle forward in the direction he was actually going, Hermes drove them backwards. He made them walk in reverse, so their hoof prints would point away from his actual destination, leading any pursuer in the wrong direction. Imagine the patience and control required to convince 50 large cattle to walk backwards, one by one, through the night. This immediately created confusion, making it appear as if the cattle had left their pasture rather than being driven away from it. The sandal trick, which we'll delve into more deeply next, to further confound any trackers, Hermes didn't use his own tiny footprints. He quickly fashioned special sandals that would leave much larger, more confusing tracks, making it seem as though a fully grown giant had driven the herd. This layered deception was a stroke of true trickster genius. Voiding witnesses. As he guided the cattle, Hermes was meticulously careful to avoid any potential witnesses. He moved through secluded valleys, over rocky terrain, where tracks would be less visible, and away from any sleeping shepherds or travelers. His swiftness and small size allowed him to navigate the landscape with unparalleled stealth. Meticulous herding. Despite his size, he managed the entire herd, keeping them together silently, guiding them towards his hidden destination. This wasn't just about stealth. It was about incredible control over 50 large, powerful animals, an astounding feat for a newborn. This entire operation, conducted by a god barely hours old, showcased his inherent genius for trickery, his mastery of disguise, and his unparalleled cunning. He wasn't relying on brute force, which he certainly possessed, as we'll later see, but on wit and deception, establishing himself as the archetypal trickster. He wanted to steal the cattle, yes, but he also wanted to prove his superior cleverness quietly, almost invisibly, to the rest of the gods. One quirky tidbit, the Homeric hymn to Hermes, describes him as an ambitious thief who planned his theft in his shrewd mind from the moment he was born. This highlights his innate nature as a planner and schemer, not just a spontaneous prankster. Historians still argue whether the detailed account of Hermes's cunning theft was meant to be purely humorous, or if it served as an origin story for why he became the god of thieves and trickery, suggesting that such cleverness, while sometimes problematic, could also be divinely sanctioned. So, as you drift towards sleep, picture the impossibly clever tiny Hermes, moving like a shadow under the cover of night, meticulously guiding Apollo's sacred cattle backward, their hoofprints pointing the wrong way. The theft begins with quiet cunning, a masterpiece of stealth from a newborn god, setting the stage for a delightful divine confrontation and an enduring legacy of mischief. The gentle sounds of unseen movement are now lulling you to sleep. You've just witnessed Hermes's ingenious start to his cattle heist, meticulously driving them backward under the cover of night. But to truly perfect his undetectable escape, the newborn trickster devised an even more subtle and confusing layer of deception, focusing on the most telltale sign of a moving herd. This brings us to the sandal trick, confusing the trail detailing Hermes's ingenious method for masking his own tiny footprints and further disorienting any potential pursuers, solidifying his reputation as the unparalleled master of stealth. Imagine a baby god, barely able to walk, leaving tracks like a giant. You see, even if the cattle were walking backward, a seasoned tracker would still be able to discern the small, distinct footprints of the herdsman driving them. Hermes, with his astonishingly precocious mind, immediately anticipated this. He knew his own tiny divine infant footprints would be a dead giveaway, betraying the identity of the thief. So, with remarkable ingenuity and speed, the infant Hermes crafted a brilliant solution. He didn't just walk barefoot. He devised and fashioned unique sandals for himself. These weren't ordinary sandals. He used branches of tamarisk or myrtle or simply bundles of twigs and bark and attached them to his tiny feet. But here's the clever part. He wore them backward so that the prints they left were not only larger than his own foot, but also pointed in the opposite direction from his actual movement. Imagine the confusion this would cause. Misleading size. The tracks would appear to be those of a much larger creature, perhaps even a giant, rather than a tiny infant. This would immediately throw any pursuer off the scent, searching for a massive thief, not a newborn. Misleading direction. Even if a tracker discerned the large prints, they would point in the wrong direction, away from the cattle's actual path and away from Hermes's true destination. It would seem as though the giant was moving in one direction while the cattle were going in the opposite, a baffling contradiction. Disguising the herdsman. The prints wouldn't look like human or divine footprints at all, further obscuring the identity of the culprit. They would appear strange, perhaps even monstrous, making the thief seem elusive and unidentifiable. This sandal trick was a stroke of absolute genius, a quintessential example of Hermes's cunning and his mastery of deception. It wasn't about overpowering his pursuers. It was about outwitting them, confusing their senses, and rendering himself virtually untraceable. He literally created a false narrative with his footsteps. He walked carefully, ensuring the cattle left their backward prints, and his own deceptive sandal tracks followed, compounding the confusion. This meticulous attention to detail, this foresight of his pursuers' thinking, is what truly sets Hermes apart as the ultimate trickster god. He understood not just how to perform a trick, but how to ensure its success by anticipating every counter move. One quirky tidbit about these sandals: some versions of the myth suggest that Hermes invented winged sandals, later in life his famous attributes, and this early backward sandal trick was a precursor to his mastery of footwear and swift travel. Historians still argue whether the detail of the backward sandals was meant to be purely a humorous element, or if it provided a mythical explanation for real-world ancient tracking techniques that involved careful observation of footprints. Either way, it perfectly illustrates Hermes's unique brand of cleverness. So, as you drift towards sleep, picture the impossibly clever infant Hermes meticulously stepping through the night, leaving a baffling trail of backward giant-like footprints. This ingenious sandal trick, designed to confuse and mislead, ensures his quiet, mischievous theft goes completely undetected, for now setting the stage for the humorous fallout to come. The subtle whispers of ancient trickery are now gently lulling you to oblivion. You've just been delighted by Hermes's ingenious sandal trick, designed to utterly confuse any tracker of his bovine heist. But even the most cunning plan can encounter an unexpected variable, a chance encounter that threatens to unravel the perfect deception. This brings us to old Battus the nosy shepherd, detailing Hermes's encounter with a mortal witness to his quiet cattle theft and his initial clever attempt to buy his silence, highlighting the trickster god's early mastery of bribery and manipulation. Imagine a tiny god, barely hours old, engaging in a complex negotiation with a mortal shepherd. You see, as Hermes was meticulously guiding Apollo's sacred cattle, walking backward, remember, through the night, his path led him past a particular olive grove where an old man named Bottus was tending his sheep. Bottus, whose name literally means babbler or stammerer, was a seasoned shepherd known for his keen eyesight and his tendency to gossip. He was, in essence, the worst kind of witness a cunning thief could encounter. Imagine the scene, the vast herd of cattle moving slowly and awkwardly backward through the dim moonlight, followed by strange, large backward footprints. And then there is Hermes himself, a tiny, almost imperceptible infant, guiding them with silent, precocious skill. Bottus, perhaps startled by the unusual sight, or simply being naturally observant, saw the impossible spectacle unfold. Hermes, despite his infancy, immediately recognized the danger that Bottus posed. A witness, even a seemingly insignificant old shepherd, could ruin his perfectly executed plan. He couldn't simply overpower Bottus. That would leave a new, undeniable trace. Instead, Hermes chose to employ a different tactic, one that would become characteristic of his later domain as the god of commerce and cunning. He approached Bottus, and in a remarkably sophisticated display of negotiation for a newborn, offered him a bribe. Hermes promised Bottus a fine breeding bull, or sometimes simply the best of the herd from the stolen cattle, or perhaps a portion of his future earnings in exchange for his absolute silence. Imagine Hermes, this tiny, seemingly helpless infant, speaking with persuasive eloquence, looking Bottus directly in the eye, and offering such a tempting reward. He made Bottus swear an oath that he would tell no one what he had seen. Hermes was establishing a contract, a deal of silence for gain, a foundational act for the future god of fair and unfair exchange. Bottus, swayed by the promise of wealth and perhaps amused or awestruck by the articulate infant, readily agreed. He swore that no one would ever hear a word of the miraculous, backward-walking cattle or their tiny, extraordinary herdsmen. He pledged his silence, believing he had struck a clever bargain with a strange but generous entity. He sealed the deal, fully convinced that he would enjoy his newfound prosperity in quiet secrecy. However, Hermes, the ultimate trickster, was not one to leave anything to chance, especially when it came to a mortal's unreliable word. He wanted to test Bottus's loyalty and truly assess his discretion. One quirky tidbit, the encounter with Bottus, highlights Hermes's immediate understanding of human nature, their greed, and their fallibility, even at such a tender age. He instinctively knew how to manipulate mortal desires. Historians still argue whether Bottus's story serves primarily as a humorous interlude in the myth, or if it acts as a moral lesson about the dangers of greed and breaking oaths, especially when dealing with the gods. It certainly sets up a memorable demonstration of Hermes's cunning. So, as you drift toward sleep, picture the impossibly clever infant, Hermes, discreetly bribing old Bottas, the nosy shepherd, to secure his silence. This quiet, cunning negotiation, a testament to Hermes's mastery of persuasion and manipulation, ensures the temporary success of his audacious theft, setting the stage for a delightful display of divine justice and humorous trickery to come. The soft whispers of an oath are fading now. You've just seen Hermes's clever negotiation with old Bottas, securing his silence with a tempting bribe and a solemn oath. But the infant trickster, ever prudent, wasn't one to simply trust a mortal's word. This brings us to the oath and the trickster's betrayal, detailing Hermes's ingenious test of Bottas's discretion and the shepherd's unfortunate yet predictable demise, a swift and quiet demonstration of divine consequences for breaking a promise, especially to a god. Imagine a tiny deity calmly setting a trap for a mortal, ensuring his own secret is truly safe. You see, after Bottas swore his solemn oath to keep silent about the stolen cattle, Hermes left him seemingly satisfied. However, the precocious god, knowing the inherent unreliability of human nature, and perhaps having a mischievous streak, decided to conduct a subtle test. He wanted to ensure that Bottas's greed wouldn't override his sworn promise. Hermes walked a short distance away, out of Bottas's immediate sight. Then he changed his disguise. He transformed himself into a different figure, perhaps an older, prosperous-looking farmer or a curious traveler. He then approached Bottas again, returning to the very spot where he had made the oath moments before. Imagine old Bottas feeling quite pleased with himself, contemplating his new wealth. He sees a stranger approaching casually. The disguised Hermes then engages Bottas in conversation innocently, asking him if he had seen anything unusual in the area recently. He specifically inquired if Bottas had seen any cattle or any unusual tracks, offering an even larger bribe, perhaps a promise of 2 cattle or even more gold if he revealed any information. This was the ultimate test. Bottas, consumed by his own greed and forgetting his solemn oath to the seemingly innocent infant from moments before, couldn't resist the temptation of an even greater reward. He immediately broke his oath, excitedly recounting every detail of what he had witnessed: the strange, backward-walking cattle and the tiny, clever baby who was driving them. He eagerly pointed out the direction Hermes had taken, fully betraying the secret he had sworn to protect. The moment Bottas's words left his lips, revealing his perfidy, Hermes immediately reverted to his true infant form, revealing his divine identity to the terrified shepherd. Bottas realized too late that he had been tricked by a god and had foolishly broken an oath to a divine being. The consequences for Bottas were swift and true to the quiet nature of Hermes's early exploits, remarkably understated. Hermes, displeased by Bottas's treachery and lack of discretion, immediately turned him into stone. Imagine the old shepherd, frozen in mid-sentence, perhaps still pointing the direction, transforming into a silent, inanimate rock, forever marking the spot where he betrayed a god. His incessant babbling was permanently silenced. This act, while cruel, perfectly demonstrated Hermes' nature as the god of trickery and oaths. He punished the breach of trust severely, ensuring that his secret remained safe and providing a cautionary tale for any future mortals who might consider betraying a god. His initial kindness was merely a test, and Battus failed spectacularly. One quirky tidbit about Battus's fate, the transformed stone, was often said to be placed prominently, sometimes near the roadside, as a permanent warning to other mortals against perjury and gossiping about divine affairs. Historians still argue whether the story of Battus serves primarily as a humorous anecdote showcasing Hermes' cunning, or as a serious moral lesson about the inviolability of oaths to the gods in ancient Greek society. Either way, it perfectly illustrates the consequences of double-crossing a deity. So, as you drift toward sleep, picture the old shepherd Battus, eager to gossip for a greater reward, suddenly turning to stone as the tiny, clever god reveals himself. This quiet, decisive act of divine justice ensures Hermes' secret is safe, allowing his audacious cattle theft to remain undisturbed as he continues his mischievous journey into the depths of the night. The stillness of stone is now gently lulling you to oblivion. You've just witnessed the quiet, stone-cold justice meted out to old Battus, ensuring Hermes' secret remained perfectly safe. With the sole mortal witness silenced, the impossibly clever infant god continued his audacious cattle heist, now needing a secure place to hide his bovine bounty. This brings us to the cave lair, hiding the evidence, detailing where Hermes concealed the stolen cattle, a clever choice of a secluded, almost undetectable natural sanctuary that further showcases his mastery of stealth and misdirection. Imagine a hidden cavern deep within the earth, now quietly housing a herd of stolen divine beasts. You see, after successfully driving Apollo's 50 sacred cattle backward across the plains, and having dealt with Battus, Hermes needed a place where the large herd could be completely hidden from any pursuers, particularly his powerful elder brother, Apollo. His own birth cave, Maya's grotto, might have been too obvious or too close to his mother. He needed a truly undetectable hideout. Hermes, with his innate understanding of the landscape and his talent for concealment, chose a secluded and deep cave near Pylos. This wasn't just any cave. It was a natural labyrinth with winding passages and hidden chambers perfect for concealing a large number of animals. Imagine the entrance perhaps obscured by overgrown vegetation, or simply blending seamlessly into the rocky mountainside, almost invisible to the casual eye. He meticulously led the entire herd into this hidden cavern. Imagine the quiet, methodical process guiding 50 large divine cattle into a dark, unfamiliar, underground space, ensuring they moved without making too much noise. that might echo out of the cave entrance. His control over the animals was as impressive as his cunning. Once inside, the cattle were safe completely out of sight and out of mind. The cave's natural features provided perfect camouflage, sealing away the evidence of his audacious theft. It was the ultimate cold case scenario, a crime committed with such stealth that the very victims disappeared without a trace. This choice of a hidden cave lair reinforces several aspects of Hermes's trickster nature. Master of concealment, he excels at making things disappear or go unnoticed. His domains would later include hidden paths and secret knowledge. Use of natural elements. He cleverly uses the natural landscape to his advantage, transforming a simple cave into an impenetrable vault for his ill-gotten gains. Foresight. He anticipates Apollo's eventual search, knowing that a god of light and clarity would rely on visible evidence and clear trails. By hiding the cattle so effectively, he was already one step ahead. Quiet discretion. The entire operation was marked by a profound lack of fanfare. There were no grand pronouncements, no dramatic battles, just a quiet, meticulous execution of a highly ambitious plan designed to remain utterly undetected. The atmosphere within the cave would have been one of damp, earthy stillness, broken only by the quiet shuffling of the cattle, their breathing, and perhaps the faint drip of water from the cavern ceiling. It was a temporary peaceful for Hermes, at least sanctuary for the stolen divine beasts. One quirky tidbit about this lair. Some versions of the myth suggest Hermes used his cunning to make the cattle feel perfectly comfortable in their new hidden home, ensuring they wouldn't try to escape and betray his location. This speaks to his persuasive abilities, even over animals. Historians still argue whether Hermes's mastery of concealment reflects ancient Greek beliefs about the power of hidden places and secret knowledge, or if it was simply a narrative device to heighten the mystery and ingenuity of his first great trick. Either way, the cattle were perfectly invisible. So, as you drift towards sleep picture, the impossibly clever infant Hermes meticulously guiding Apollo's 50 sacred cattle into the dark, silent depths of a hidden cave. This secret lair deep within the earth now holds the quietly grazing evidence of his audacious theft, waiting for the eventual, humorous, yet significant confrontation with his elder brother. The cool, damp quiet of the hidden cave is now gently lulling you to oblivion. You've just seen Hermes meticulously hide Apollo's stolen cattle in a deep, secret cave, a perfect act of concealment. But the infant god's audacious plan didn't stop at mere theft and concealment. He immediately moved to consolidate his gain and assert his divine status through a very specific, ritualistic act. This brings us to the ritual sacrifice, a divine offering detailing Hermes's curious and precise offering of the stolen meat to the other gods, a bold and calculated move designed to honor the Olympians and subtly include himself among their ranks, even with stolen goods. Imagine a newborn god conducting a solemn sacrifice while his victim's meat is still technically stolen. You see, for the ancient Greeks, sacrifice was a fundamental act of piety, a way to honor the gods, seek their favor, or establish one's place within the divine order. It was a formal, ritualized process with specific rules about how the animal was killed, butchered, and which parts were offered to the deities. Hermes, despite being only hours old, understood these sacred customs perfectly. After safely hiding the herd in the cave, Hermes took 2 of Apollo's cattle, dragged them out, and prepared them for sacrifice. Imagine the immense effort for a tiny infant god to handle 2 large cattle. But Hermes' divine strength and precocity allowed him to do it. His method of slaughter was also ingenious. He invented the art of fire drilling rubbing sticks together to create the flames for the sacrifice, another immediate invention. He then butchered the cattle with surprising skill and precision. But here's the truly clever part. He performed a very specific and highly symbolic division of the meat for the sacrifice. He cut the meat into 12 portions. 11 portions for the Olympians. He laid out 11 portions of meat on skewers, clearly intended for the 11 established Olympian gods: Zeus, Hera, Poseidon, Demeter, Hestia, Apollo, Artemis, Ares, Athena, Hephaestus, Aphrodite. This was a bold move, publicly acknowledging the Olympian pantheon and humbly offering them the first fruits of his acquisition. It was a gesture of respect and an implied declaration of his own allegiance. 1 portion for himself. Crucially, he reserved the 12th portion for himself, thus subtly, and without asking permission, adding himself to the revered ranks of the Olympian 12. This audacious act of self-proclamation was done with quiet confidence, a clear statement of his intention to join the highest divine council. Hermes then calmly ate his own portion, or tasted it, as some gods abstained from consuming sacrificial meat directly, and burned the rest of the meat as an offering to the gods. He then carefully destroyed all traces of the sacrifice, burying the bones, dousing the fire, and leaving no evidence of his ritual. His meticulousness ensured the act remained as secret as possible for now. This ritual sacrifice served multiple purposes for Hermes. Honoring the gods, it was a genuine act of piety, regardless of the stolen origin of the cattle. He was acknowledging divine hierarchy, establishing status by offering to the 12 and reserving a portion for himself. He was subtly asserting his claim to be an Olympian, a bold move for a newborn. Thanksgiving. It was a form of thanksgiving for his successful theft and concealment, demonstrating his foresight and gratitude, even in mischief. One quirky tidbit about this sacrifice in some myths: Hermes, upon performing the sacrifice, also invented the ritual of dividing the meat for human consumption after the gods had received their portion, thus establishing the very practice of sacrificial feasts for mortals. Historians still argue whether Hermes's invention of sacrifice reflects a mythical origin for Greek religious practices, or if it simply emphasizes his dual nature as both a trickster and a god who establishes order and ritual. Either way, it was a profound act. So, as you drift towards sleep, picture the impossibly clever infant Hermes meticulously butchering stolen cattle and offering precisely divided portions to the Olympian gods, quietly inserting himself into their sacred number. This audacious ritualistic act, performed with serene precision, further solidified his claim to divine status, setting the stage for the humorous yet significant confrontation with his elder brother, Apollo. The scent of ancient sacrifice is now gently lulling you to oblivion. You've just observed Hermes's audacious yet precise ritual sacrifice of the stolen cattle, a clever maneuver to subtly claim his place among the Olympians. Now across the plains of Pieria, far from the hidden cave and the lingering scent of sacrifice, the victim of Hermes's cunning finally realizes something is amiss. This brings us to Apollo's discovery. The missing herd, detailing the radiant god's realization that his prized sacred cattle have vanished, and his calm, methodical search for the elusive thief, a testament to his powers of observation and deduction. Imagine a god of light suddenly facing a profound and baffling mystery. You see, Apollo, the radiant god of light, prophecy, music, and pastoral life, was incredibly proud of his magnificent herd of 50 sacred cattle. They were gleaming, white, well-fed, and meticulously tended in the lush pastures of Pieria. He would often spend his days watching them graze, perhaps playing his lyre, the very instrument Hermes had just invented from a tortoise shell to them, or simply basking in their tranquil presence. However, one morning, as the sun began to rise and cast its golden light over the plains, Apollo approached his pasture and immediately sensed that something was wrong. The herd was not as it should be. He counted them, and his divine senses confirmed it. His 50 sacred cattle were gone. Not just a few. The entire herd had vanished without a trace. Imagine the confusion for Apollo. This wasn't a messy, obvious theft. There were no signs of a struggle, no broken fences, no discarded tools. The pasture simply seemed empty. He began to search his keen, divine eyes, scanning the ground for any clues, any footprints. He quickly found tracks, but they were utterly bewildering. The footprints seemed to indicate that the cattle had walked backward, leading away from the pasture in the wrong direction. And accompanying these backward cattle prints were strange, impossibly large, and unidentifiable tracks, certainly not those of a human or any animal he recognized. This was Hermes's sandal trick at play, a perfectly executed deception designed to confound even a god of light and truth. Apollo, being the god of clarity and order, found this utter chaos of evidence deeply perplexing. His usual methods of precise observation and logical deduction were failing him. He was searching for a large thief, following tracks that pointed the wrong way, baffled by the impossibility of the scene. The subtle genius of Hermes's precocious planning was clearly working. Despite his confusion, Apollo's persistence was unwavering. He was a god of truth, and he was determined to uncover the mystery. He used his divine foresight, but even that seemed clouded by the sheer cunning of the trickster. He meticulously followed the confusing trail, slowly but surely, unraveling the deceptive layers. He questioned any witnesses he could find, but the only one who had seen anything, Bottas, was now a stone, perfectly silenced. Apollo's frustration would have grown, but always tempered by his inherent calm. He was not a god prone to violent outbursts like Zeus or Ares, at least not initially. Instead, his anger would manifest as a methodical, unwavering determination to solve the puzzle and restore the order that had been so cleverly disrupted. His missing cattle were not just a loss of property. They were an affront to his sense of divine harmony. One quirky tidbit about Apollo's search: some versions suggest he even consulted omens or asked other deities for help, highlighting how truly baffling Hermes' trickery was. Historians still argue whether Apollo's slow discovery reflected a humorous portrayal of a powerful god being outwitted by an infant, or if it was a narrative device to demonstrate Hermes' unique, unparalleled cunning as a trickster, setting him apart, even from his elder Olympian siblings. Either way, it was a very significant absence that prompted a determined, boringly methodical search. So, as you drift toward sleep, picture the radiant Apollo, his brow furrowed in mild perplexity, meticulously examining the baffling backward tracks of his vanished cattle. The quiet disappearance of his prized herd marks the beginning of a delightful, divine comedy, setting the stage for his eventual, unexpected confrontation with a certain mischievous newborn. The calm emptiness of the pasture is now slowly lulling you to oblivion. Apollo, the radiant god of music, prophecy, and light, felt a prickle of unease as the sun began its ascent. As patron of herdsmen, he prided himself on the magnificent snow-white cattle he tended in Pieria. Each morning, he would count them a ritual of contentment. But this particular dawn, something was amiss. His eyes scanned the familiar pasture, a frown deepening on his perfect brow. 1, 2, 3. A tremor of alarm ran through him. 50 of his finest cattle were gone. Not a trace, not a single hoofprint, leading away from the field in the direction they should have gone. It was as if they had simply vanished into thin air. Apollo's realization was swift and accompanied by a surge of furious indignation. Who would dare steal from an Olympian god? And how could they be so utterly untraceable? His divine senses, usually so keen, were baffled by the lack of clear signs. He was a god of order, and this brazen act of chaos ignited his wrath. His search for the thief was immediate and relentless. He strode across the pastures, his golden sandals kicking up dust, his gaze sharp and piercing. He examined the ground, looking for any anomaly. He found peculiar, backward-facing tracks, so strange they seemed designed to mislead. He saw no signs of a large herd being driven, only these baffling reverse prints. He questioned the nymphs of the woods, the shepherds tending their own flocks, even the birds of the air, but none had seen anything out of the ordinary, or at least nothing that made sense. He traveled far and wide, from the peaks of Olympus to the rivers of the earth, his frustration growing with every fruitless step. He was Apollo, the unerring archer, the all-seeing god, and yet this thief had outsmarted him completely. His search was not just physical, it was an act of divine justice. He called upon his powers of prophecy, seeking an omen, a sign from the cosmos that would reveal the culprit. Finally, through his divine insight, or perhaps a hint from the omniscient sun god Helios, the truth dawned on him, and it was utterly unexpected and, frankly, quite infuriating. The thief was none other than his newborn half-brother, Hermes, a mere infant, barely a day old. The realization was both astonishing and infuriating. A baby had outwitted him, the mighty Apollo. Apollo, his initial fury having subsided into a simmering, incredulous annoyance, approached the secluded cave on Mount Selene. He knew this was the dwelling of Maia, one of the Pleiades, and the mother of his newfound, incredibly audacious half-brother. He wouldn't storm in bellowing accusations. That was not his style, especially when dealing with a gentle nymph and the mother of a god, even if that god was currently an infant cattle rustler. He paused at the entrance, allowing the gentle light he emanated to soften so as not to startle the timid Maia. His golden aura, usually so brilliant, became a warm, inviting glow. He saw her within, tending to her swaddled infant, a picture of maternal serenity that clashed comically with the outrageous act his son had just committed. "Greetings, gentle Maia." Apollo's voice resonated calm and clear, but with an underlying current of bewilderment. He didn't raise his voice, nor did he enter uninvited. He stood respectfully at the threshold. Maia, startled but not alarmed by the sudden presence of the radiant god, rose gracefully. "Lord Apollo," she murmured, a blush rising to her cheeks, surprised by the visit of such a magnificent deity. Apollo offered a slight, almost weary smile. "I come seeking not conflict, but understanding," he began, his tone remarkably devoid of the anger he had felt moments before. "It appears a matter of some missing property has led me to your humble dwelling." He then gestured vaguely towards the infant in the cradle, still maintaining a facade of innocence. "It seems my prize cattle, 50 of them, have vanished from their pastures, and through some perplexing twist of fate, the trail leads most unexpectedly to this very cave." His words were carefully chosen, a gentle insinuation rather than a direct accusation. He implied the impossibility of a newborn committing such a feat, subtly putting the onus on Maia to explain or intervene, while still clearly stating the problem. He watched her carefully, his divine eyes missing nothing. He could see the flicker of unease in her expression, the slight tremor in her hands as she instinctively glanced at her son. He hadn't come to terrify her, but to prod the truth from her, to see if she was aware of her son's extraordinary and troublesome talents. His approach was calculated, a blend of divine authority and reasoned diplomacy, aimed at unraveling the mystery without resorting to brute force. Inside the cave, as Apollo's calm yet pointed accusations filled the air, the tiny figure of Hermes stirred in his cradle. He had been feigning a deep, innocent slumber, but with the presence of the radiant god of light and truth, he knew his charade had to step up a notch. He slowly awoke, stretching his impossibly small limbs with a theatrical yawn. His eyes, bright and quick as a hummingbird's, blinked innocently up at Apollo, then at his mother Maya, whose face was a mixture of anxiety and bewilderment. Hermes let out a series of coos and gurgles, the very picture of a helpless, bewildered infant. He pushed his tiny fists against his eyes, as if still heavy with sleep. Then, with a prodigious effort, he managed to speak, his voice a reedy, barely audible whisper that was utterly at odds with the cunning mind it masked. "Oh, great Apollo!" He squeaked, his voice thick with what sounded like childish wonder. "Why do you speak of such strange things, cattle missing property?" He gazed around the cave as if genuinely confused. "I am but a babe, Lord. My feet are soft, still smelling of my mother's milk. How could I possibly have ventured out of this cave, let alone driven a herd of mighty cattle across the land?" He offered a series of clever alibis delivered with a conviction that would have shamed an adult. "My only journey today has been from my mother's breast to this cradle," he insisted, pointing to his swaddling clothes with a delicate finger. "My greatest feat of strength has been to lift my own head for a moment, and even that tires me so." He even appealed to reason with a subtle jab at Apollo's own reputation for truth and wisdom. Surely a god as wise and discerning as yourself would not accuse a newborn of such a deed. Imagine the laughter on Olympus. A child barely a day old, a master thief. It would be a tale for the ages, but not one of truth. As he spoke, he punctuated his denial with little whimpers, as if the very thought of such accusations distressed his tender infant heart. He made sure to occasionally glance at Maya, seeking her implicit confirmation of his innocence, knowing her maternal instincts would instinctively protect him. All the while, behind those wide, innocent eyes, his mind was racing, enjoying the cleverness of his deception, and perhaps even a little bit marveling at his own audacity. The scene shifted from Maya's cave to the grand hall of Olympus, where Zeus, the king of the gods, sat enthroned, his mighty presence filling the air. Apollo, still a picture of dignified exasperation, stood before him, recounting the tale of the stolen cattle with a meticulousness that only a god of order could possess. Opposite him, Hermes, no longer a helpless infant, but still appearing remarkably small and innocent, stood with his mother, Maya, his eyes wide and seemingly guileless. Zeus listened, a faint, knowing smile playing on his lips. He was the all-seeing, all-knowing Father, and while the details of Hermes's audacious act were indeed new, the spirit of it was entirely familiar. He observed his youngest son, who, despite Apollo's detailed accusations and the backward hoofprints, continued to maintain an air of utter bafflement and injured innocence. "So!" Zeus boomed his voice, rumbling like distant thunder, but with an unmistakable note of amusement. "My son, Apollo the radiant, the truthful, accuses my son, Hermes, barely a day old, of stealing 50 of his prize cattle, and what's more, making them walk backward." He raised an eyebrow, a flicker of lightning in his eyes, but it was playful, not menacing. Hermes, seizing the opportunity, piped up his voice, still deceptively soft. "Father, how can this be? My legs are but twigs. My breath still smells of mother's milk. Would a mighty Olympian truly believe such a preposterous tale against a helpless babe?" He even managed to squeeze out a single glistening tear which rolled down his cheek with practiced ease. Zeus, however, was not so easily swayed. He saw through the artifice, appreciating the sheer audacity and cleverness of his newborn. He chuckled, a deep, resonant sound that echoed through the hall. "Come, come, Hermes," he said, his tone firm yet indulgent. "You cannot outwit your father. I have seen many a trick in my long days, and yours, while remarkably ingenious for one so young, is not entirely beyond my ken." He turned to Apollo, who was still fuming silently. "Apollo, my son, your frustration is understandable. To be outmaneuvered by a mere infant is indeed a blow to one's pride." Then his gaze softened slightly. "But consider, this does not such a talent, such quick wit and cunning, have a place on Olympus. He has shown himself to be resourceful, swift, and quite adept at persuasion, even if it is of the deceptive kind." Zeus paused, allowing his words to sink in. He wasn't punishing Hermes. Instead, he was acknowledging his unique gifts. "Hermes," he continued, "you will return the cattle to your brother. There will be no more of this backward walking, and you, Apollo." He turned back to his elder son, a twinkle in his eye. "You will learn to appreciate the unexpected. Perhaps there is more to this scamp than meets the eye." He concluded with a pronouncement that was both a judgment and a prophecy. "This dispute is settled. Hermes, you have much to learn, but also much to offer. Your quick mind and nimble spirit shall be put to good use. Apollo, you shall have your cattle back, and perhaps a new friend and brother in mischief." It was a resolution that left both parties with something, and Zeus with a profound sense of paternal amusement. He knew this was just the beginning of Hermes's playful yet pivotal role in the Olympian pantheon. Despite Zeus's firm yet amused decree that Hermes return the cattle, the cunning infant had one more trick up his sleeve. The scene shifts back to where Apollo and Hermes, accompanied by Zeus, found the hidden herd. Apollo, was still bristling at the thought of his stolen beasts, especially the two that Hermes had already sacrificed. As Apollo was busy counting his retrieved cattle, a task that still filled him with a degree of irritation due to the missing two, Hermes casually pulled out something he had kept hidden in his swaddling clothes. It was a strange, beautiful instrument fashioned from the shell of a tortoise, with stretched ox hide and 7 taut strings. This was the lyre, an invention Hermes had crafted just hours after his birth, using the very creatures he had encountered on his audacious journey. With a playful, almost mischievous smile, Hermes began to pluck the strings. A melody unlike anything the world had ever heard filled the air. It was a sweet, ethereal sound, full of intricate harmonies and haunting beauty. The notes danced light and agile, mirroring Hermes's own nimble spirit. Apollo, a god deeply attuned to music, was utterly captivated. His irritation at the cattle theft melted away, replaced by an overwhelming sense of wonder and delight. He stood frozen, listening intently, his golden eyes wide with awe. He had never imagined such sounds were possible. The music spoke to his very soul, stirring emotions he hadn't known he possessed. When Hermes finally ceased playing, the silence that followed was profound. Apollo was speechless for a moment. Then he let out a sigh of pure contentment. "What is this wondrous thing?" he asked, his voice softer than Hermes had ever heard it. "What magic have you wrought, little brother?" Hermes, seeing his advantage, feigned modesty. "It is merely a plaything, Lord Apollo, a simple instrument I fashioned from humble materials." He then held it out almost as if presenting a gift. "Though if it pleases you so greatly, perhaps we could strike a bargain." Apollo, entirely enchanted, leaned forward eagerly. "A bargain? Name your price, young one." With a twinkle in his eye, Hermes seized the opportunity. "My price is simple, great Apollo. Give me your entire herd of cattle, the ones you have just recovered, and no mention of the two I borrowed. And in return, I shall give you this lyre and teach you the secrets of its melodies." Apollo didn't hesitate. The exquisite beauty of the music outweighed any lingering resentment over the cattle. He was a god of art and harmony, and this instrument was the epitome of both. "Done," he declared, extending his hand. "The cattle are yours, young Hermes, in exchange for this divine gift." And so a peaceful bargain was struck. Hermes, the cunning thief, transformed into the generous inventor, bestowing upon Apollo the instrument that would become one of his most iconic symbols, making him the undisputed god of music. In return, Hermes, the god of flocks and herds, secured a massive personal herd, along with Apollo's friendship, and eventually a place of high honor among the Olympians. It was a deal perfectly suited to the trickster god's nature, achieving his desires not through force, but through sheer wit and irresistible charm. the clever bargain with Apollo, far from being a mere footnote in Hermes's burgeoning divine career, cemented his most prominent and enduring roles in the Olympian pantheon. From that audacious cradle-robbing beginning, Hermes's quick wit, cunning, and ability to move seamlessly between realms became his defining characteristics. He was formally recognized as the herald and messenger of the gods, equipped with his iconic winged sandals, Talaria, and the caduceus, the very staff he used to pacify the battling snakes. This role made him the vital link between Olympus and the mortal world, carrying Zeus's decrees, guiding heroes, and delivering divine interventions. Beyond his celestial duties, Hermes naturally became the god of travelers, roads, and boundaries, those embarking on journeys, whether by land or sea, invoked his protection. The ancient world saw stone piles called Hermes, erected at crossroads and along routes, serving as landmarks and symbols of his watchfulness over those who passed. His initial act of thievery, though mischievous, also contributed to his domain. He became the patron of merchants and trade, embodying the quick-thinking, persuasive nature required in commerce. He was associated with good fortune and gain, whether honestly acquired or sometimes not. He was also somewhat paradoxically acknowledged as the god of thieves, a nod to his own precocious skill, but a role generally understood to encompass cleverness and ingenuity rather than pure malice. The peaceful, quiet consequences of his early exploits were profound. The lyre, the instrument of his ingenious bribe, became central to Apollo's identity, symbolizing the harmonious exchange that transformed a potential rivalry into a fraternal bond. This exchange also paved the way for a dynamic interplay between the two gods, often seen as foils to each other. Apollo representing order, reason, and divine law. Hermes representing adaptability, communication, and the art of the unexpected. Hermes's very nature, a blend of trickster and benevolent guide, allowed for a fluidity and adaptability within the divine order. He facilitated communication, smooth transitions, and brought a touch of unpredictable brilliance to the cosmos. His legacy was not one of grand, thunderous pronouncements, but of the subtle, essential currents that allow the world, both mortal and divine, to connect, to move, and to thrive in its intricate, often surprising ways.